Tonight, Australia's largest whale stranding, with 380 now dead after a further 200 were discovered beached in Tasmania. Also tonight, near-death experience. A Darwin toddler gets to meet those involved in saving his life. Can coronavirus cause Parkinson's disease? Experts warn it could lead to a wave of cases. And what can we expect this coming season? Scientists predict fewer cyclones for the top end, but more for Australia's east coast. Good evening, Eleni Roussos with ABC News. It's become the biggest whale stranding in Australian history after another 200 pilot whales were discovered this morning in Macquarie Harbour on Tasmania's west coast. A total of 380 whales are now dead. 50 have been saved, while another 30 remain alive as rescue efforts continue.
It wasn't a sight rescue teams wanted to wake up to on day 3. 200 more whales, all dead, discovered on a reconnaissance flight, a whale stranding record.
This is definitely the biggest in Tasmania, and we believe it's the biggest recorded in terms of numbers in Australia.
Crews were already racing against the clock to save some of the 270 pilot whales found on Monday. The discovery of the extra 200 just a few kilometres away brought with it more bad news.
We can confirm that 380 whales are dead.
The newly discovered whales are believed to be part of the same pod, dying early on, then moving around the harbour with the current. In some better news, frantic rescue efforts have paid off for dozens.
The good news is that we have saved 50. So now we have a total of 50 that have been taken off the bar and placed in deep water and appear to have stayed there.
Another 30 are still alive and crews hope to push them out to sea soon. Staff from local fish farms have been pitching in, saving mothers and calves from the sandbar.
It was a pretty grim scene, pretty overwhelming seeing so many, and they were a bit more lively yesterday, so there was a lot of flapping and a lot of noise, but we just did what we could.
Strawn locals are familiar with whale strandings, but not of this size.
Look, it's just horrible and sad and chaotic, and, there's nothing good comes of it.
Rescue teams will keep working as long as there are live animals in the water, but the focus of this operation has already shifted to retrieval and disposal of the hundreds of dead whales. The best method is still being decided. Burial is being considered.
However, that's a bit of a problem because you'd have to bury them somewhere where, a big sea is not going to wash the bodies out again. So, yes, huge problem.
A massive task for the days ahead. Edith Bevan, ABC News, Strawn.
A Darwin toddler has been reunited with the paramedics and care flight staff who saved his life after a near drowning in Darwin's rural area on Father's Day. The little boy was in intensive care for a week, but doctors say the 16-month-old has made a full recovery.
Little Patrick is one lucky lad. Today he's running around and teasing his big sister, but 2 weeks ago he almost lost his life.
He was in the room with me playing, and I thought he was going to lay down with my dad. And next thing you know, my 15-year-old brother had a bad gut feeling and he went outside and found him.
He was decerebrate, which is the brain is starving of oxygen at the worst possible sort of situation you can get into.
A few moments out of sight on a rural block without a pool fence, and this family's Father's Day celebrations could have been a family tragedy.
You never think it's going to be you are going to be that person that it's going to be that serious.
In intensive care for a week, Patrick has defied the odds, and not for the first time. He suffered a similar drowning incident in a bath a few months ago. Intensive care paramedic Jeff was especially touched. His pint-sized patient, the same age as his grandson.
You never get comfortable with those sort of situations. You kind of get used to the idea of getting used to it, but it still never happens.
But not everyone is as lucky as Patrick. 9 people drowned in the Northern Territory in the past year, 3 of them under 9 years of age. And as the weather starts to heat up again, paramedics are pleading with Territorians to play it safe by the water.
With kids, keep an eye on them. flotation devices and learn CPR.
And I think everywhere should have pool fences. I think the government needs to change that.
Under current legislation, properties larger than 1.8 hectares don't need to fence swimming pools. Melissa McKay, ABC News.
Police in Nhulunbuy have arrested a man and woman from a remote West Arnhem community over a major drug bust. Police seized a large quantity of cannabis along with methamphetamine and drug implements after searching a car belonging to the man. The vehicle was also seized. Police believe the drugs were destined for remote communities and estimate the cannabis would have sold for $100,000. The couple is facing numerous charges, including possessing a commercial quantity of a drug. The man has been remanded in custody while the woman is due to appear in court in 2 weeks. And Darwin police investigating a hit and run on Monday have released images of a car they believe was responsible. A 5-year-old boy was severely injured when a car failed to stop at a pedestrian crossing opposite the Leanya Water Park. The car can be seen on Vanderlyn Drive moments before the crash. They're hoping someone recognises the car or the driver. A federal court judge has labelled a cabinet minister's behaviour as criminal after he left an Afghan man languishing in an immigration detention centre despite a tribunal ordering he be granted a visa. Acting Immigration Minister Alan Tudge is accused of unlawful conduct in not immediately releasing the man from the Yonga Hill facility in Western Australia. The judge said that amounted to a deprivation of liberty. The delay happened as the minister launched an appeal against the visa being granted. Mr Tudge strongly rejects the suggestions of improper conduct and says he's considering further legal options. 6 million homes and businesses will be directly connected to the fibre optic internet 7 years after the Coalition rejected a similar plan by Labor. The federal government's 3-year rollout promises lightning-fast connections of up to 1 gigabyte a second, but consumers will have to pay extra for speedier access. Here's political editor Andrew Probyn.
A decision that's been buffering for 7 years.
Blazing fast broadband.
Fibre to the premises to be finally rolled out to millions of homes and businesses under a $3.5 billion upgrade.
We're now taking the logical next step in the evolution of the network.
The most extraordinary, wasteful, humiliating backflip in a generation.
Labor castigating the government for leaving millions of Australians dependent on old copper wires for so long. The pandemic testing the limits of the national broadband network with so many people working from home.
Broadband went from being a utility to actually being a lifeline.
Hello. Video meetings, telehealth, virtual catch-ups.
We've seen a sharp spike in an existing underlying trend.
A trend that's been exponential for a decade. The average household downloads were just 10 gigabytes a month in 2010. By December last year, it was 258 gigabytes. Now it's 300, up 16% in just 9 months.
I'm not a tech head.
On coming to office in 2013,
wow,
Tony Abbott ripped up Kevin Rudd's plan to connect homes and businesses directly to fibre, opting for a fibre to the street corner model.
Sooner, cheaper and more affordably.
But slower speeds than Labor's model, using the copper wire network bought from Telstra.
I'm confident that in the years to come, Malcolm is going to be Mr Broadband.
This is a monumental policy backflip by the Morrison government to begin delivering to Australians what they should have had all along.
Realising some of the NBN's original ambition through fibre instead of copper will generate 25,000 jobs, but also make NBN Co a better prospect for sale. When that eventually comes, it'll make the government a tidy sum. Turns out fibre really is good for you after all. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
The faster NBN speeds won't be available to everyone, only those on existing fixed line networks, and they're not cheap. Customers are currently paying up to $150 a month for the premium service. Consumer Affairs reporter Amy Bainbridge has more.
For years, Rob Slazenger battled to run his IT business with a poor NBN connection.
I had to make probably in excess of 30 complaint calls to the provider regarding either the incredibly poor speed, the lack of stability, or in fact, there was no service at all.
He's done away with NBN altogether.
I gave up, and now I depend on my mobile phone for hotspot data.
But now those on fixed-line NBN networks can look forward to a significant boost.
ACAN's been calling for a long time to have a clear upgrade path for NBN. We're really pleased that this is the beginning of seeing that plan.
The upgrade promises faster speeds of up to 1 gigabit per second. Only about 20% of homes and businesses can currently reach that speed, and they typically pay about $150 a month for the premium service. The plan is to make it available for up to 75% of homes and businesses on fixed-line networks by 2023.
That's 3 years away, and technology changes so much during that time. It's very hard to know what the demand will be.
Fibre will be rolled out close to homes, but if you want that fibre to reach your home or business to achieve the faster speeds, you'll need to order the premium service and pay for it on your monthly bill.
And it will be more expensive, so really it should only be taken up by people that absolutely need that speed, so businesses that have heavy uploads.
Rob Slazenger won't be going back to the NBN, but he believes the announcement may give other small businesses a boost.
For others, it may well produce the confidence that they will go back to the NBN.
Customers should be able to order faster services by the middle of next year, and the growing 5G network will give consumers more choice. Amy Bainbridge, ABC News.
COVID-19 can cause short-term symptoms like a loss of smell and taste. Now, Australian researchers fear a silent wave of more serious brain conditions like Parkinson's disease could follow this pandemic, as it did with the Spanish flu more than 100 years ago. Medical reporter Sophie Scott has a story.
When Sheila Bottrell began limping while walking her dog, a friend convinced her to see a neurologist.
In March 2011, and he diagnosed me with Parkinson's. I've tried to get on with life and not let it get in the way.
Researchers from the Florey Institute fear some people who've had COVID-19 might face the same diagnosis, with a potential silent wave of brain illness following the pandemic.
The risk is real. Let me put it this way. I don't want to catch this virus.
How might a virus increase your risk of developing Parkinson's disease? The virus enters the body through the nose or mouth, where it then causes inflammation to the part of the brain responsible for the loss of smell and taste. This inflammation damages brain cells, increasing the risk of conditions such as Parkinson's disease. Researchers say it's something that happened after the Spanish flu pandemic more than 100 years ago.
There was actually a 2 to 3-fold increase in the incidence of Parkinson's disease 5 years after the flu epidemic itself.
And that's how we get a diagnosis.
Scientists have designed a smell test to identify people with early signs of Parkinson's before serious damage is done.
If we knew who is at risk of developing it early, before that brain cell loss becomes catastrophic, it gives us a potential opportunity to intervene to stop the death of those brain cells and to try to protect them.
It's too early to say if anyone who's had COVID-19 will go on to definitely get Parkinson's disease, but scientists want people who've had the virus to be monitored by a health professional. That would give people the best chance of early diagnosis and treatment. Sophie Scott, ABC News.
Just weeks after people started returning to the office, the British Prime Minister has changed course to suppress a dramatic spike in COVID-19 infections. The UK has just recorded 5,000 daily cases, its highest number in 4 months. And the second wave is worsening across Europe, with the 7-day average soaring to more than 51,000 cases. From London, Europe correspondent Samantha Hawley reports.
It was Boris Johnson's third address to the nation since the pandemic began.
There have been too many breaches, too many opportunities for our invisible enemy to slip through undetected.
In the UK, positive tests have quadrupled in a month. Hospital admissions have doubled in a fortnight.
Boris. Prime Minister. Prime Minister.
Earlier, Boris Johnson held crisis talks at Downing Street before heading to the House of Commons to announce a reduction in freedoms.
I'm sorry to say that, as in Spain and France and many other countries, we've reached a perilous turning point.
The last call in pubs will be brought forward with patrons out the door by 10. There'll be an extension of the mandatory use of face masks and heftier fines for rule breakers. And after weeks of urging workers to head back to the office, now they should stay at home.
A stitch in time saves 9.
I think probably just closing the bars at 10 ultimately won't go far enough, and they'll probably need to do a bit more, looking at how the curve's going up quite sharply.
The suite of new restrictions might not amount to a second national lockdown, but Boris Johnson is warning if they don't reduce the R, or reproductive rate, down to 1, where one person is infecting just one other person, there will be more to come. In the worst hit nations across the Channel, the reins are tightening too. Parts of Madrid are now locked down. The city accounts for a third of all new cases in Spain.
This is a joke. The neighbourhood next to mine is not confined, but mine is.
The military's been asked to help enforce the rules, and Boris Johnson says that's an option in the UK too. Samantha Hawley, ABC News, London.
Still to come this hour, the man who broke the Watergate scandal reveals the inner workings of the Trump White House.
He's the wrong man for the job. He is impulsive.
Do you feel hopeful about your country's future?
No, I'm deeply, profoundly worried about it.
Plus, the critical decisions that triggered Victoria's deadly second wave. That's coming up. With international borders closed, states outside of Victoria have seen a rush of city people flocking to the regions. But it isn't quite filling the gap left by international tourists.
When WA's hard border made the state an island within an island, the Premier urged sandgropers to wander out yonder.
We actually had plans to travel to Europe in July, but then coronavirus came along, so we travelled WA instead.
It's a pattern being repeated in states where travel is permitted. Locals soaking up the sights in their own backyards on trips their state and territory governments have sometimes discounted.
We're seeing great people just come out, decide they're going to come for a drive, and we're really seeing a lot of young families.
But the lifeblood of Australia's tourism industry are international tourists. Last year, 9 million of them visited Australia, spending around $30 billion. And while local tourism is welcome, economists say it's a sugar hit that can't be sustained.
Domestic tourists are a bit more price sensitive. There's not those people looking to spend, premium rates for a local holiday.
In a good year, 2,000 international guests will join one of Greg Price's bus tours. But since March, he's struggled to get locals on board.
We're very internationally focused, so our tours are very much designed for people who haven't been in Australia very much.
No one knows when the international borders will reopen, but like many business owners, Greg Price is acutely aware of when his bills are due and when the lifeline provided by the federal government's JobKeeper program ends.
It's hard to say how long we could go without it. I guess at the end of the day, your staff start looking at, what's more secure, what's got more certainty for them.
And with borders shut and bills piling up, he's worried the industry's best minds and talent will be forced to walk away. Clint Jasper, ABC News.
From midnight tonight, people living in New South Wales will finally be able to freely travel to South Australia. For the people of Broken Hill, that comes as a huge relief. The town is only 50 kilometres from the South Australian border, and locals are excited about resuming a much more normal life.
It's part of New South Wales, but in many ways has closer ties to South Australia. In Broken Hill, border restrictions prompted by coronavirus 6 months ago have been deeply unpopular, and people are glad they're finally being lifted.
This brings people into Broken Hill, so it'll be a good thing all round.
It just means that we have a lot more freedom to do what we want to do and be able to party in Adelaide.
Lucy Hannaford has been cut off from most of her family while she raises her young daughter.
Missing out on all that crucial time of playing and you know, getting the love and cuddles and stuff. It's really sad.
She's had to care for a sick uncle and have a medical procedure herself without anyone to care for her child.
It's so hard, and this is happening to not just me, hundreds and more than like other people as well. It's ridiculous.
Peter Nash agreed to quarantine so he could attend his grandchild's first birthday in South Australia, but the time and cost is something most can't afford.
Expensive fortnight sitting in a room doing basically nothing, but that was the only way we could get into South Australia.
Broken Hill is expecting a surge in traffic as people take advantage of being able to travel freely between the two states. But some businesses say it's come too late for the region's tourism industry.
For us, this year's completely done. We're done and dusted. Struggling. Maybe we'll open next year, don't know.
We've got to make sure that we have a border bubble and that our health is secured, our education for our kids is secured, and our families, we can see them.
But for now, this outback city just got a little less isolated. Saskia Mabin, ABC News, Broken Hill.
The CBDs of Australia's capital cities have been decimated by the pandemic and they may never fully recover. New figures from the Property Council reveal less than half the workers who left their offices have returned.
Professional services firm EY sent thousands of workers home in March, leaving its 23 floors in this Sydney high-rise empty. It's now trying to work out how to get them back in.
There's got to be a reason to get out of bed and come into the office.
Almost half of EY staff want to continue working remotely and only go into the office for client meetings or teamwork, and that's common across the country. Only 7% of Melbourne's CBD workforce is still going into the office. In Sydney, it's 30%. But even in cities like Perth, the number of CBD workers is significantly down. Property values will fall.
For prime grade office buildings, our expectation is in the order of around 5 to 7%. For secondary grade assets, we do believe that values could fall anywhere between 15 and 20%.
Some businesses are trying to get ahead and sublease their extra floor space, like Qantas, which wants to offload 25,000 square metres in Sydney, Melbourne and Hobart. And it could get worse.
A lot of companies may not survive, and that will have an impact on vacancy in the CBD.
While video conferencing has become part of daily life for professionals in 2020, the office isn't going to disappear completely. Virtual meetings can't replace the effectiveness of face-to-face and group work. So offices will look different.
Previously, offices were about 70% of the floor space devoted to focus desks. We see that dropping quite substantially, probably as low as 30 or 40%.
They'll be replaced with more communal areas for teamwork.
Sales meeting this morning.
For now, with social distancing and no vaccine, offices like EY's will stay mostly empty.
We just could not fit all the people back into the EY offices tomorrow, even if they all wanted to come in.
When too much space may never be enough. Rachel Papazzoni, ABC News.
To finance now, and the Australian dollar fell sharply again today, but the local share market produced its best gain in 4 months. Here's Alan Kohler.
Well, former Prime Minister and Treasurer Paul Keating launched a typically colourful attack on the Reserve Bank today, which he called the reverse bank. It should do more to help the government, he said. Shoulder the load, which means funding fiscal policy and government spending. Mountainous sums of it. He concluded that Deputy Governor Guy Debelle's meandering thoughts yesterday were not good enough. The market thinks it was good enough. The dollar fell a cent yesterday and another cent today. So if the purpose of the Deputy Governor's meanderings was to talk the Aussie dollar down, which it would have been, it succeeded. If he was trying to please Paul Keating, however, he failed. As a result of that speech, markets are now starting to think there'll be another rate cut in 2 weeks from 0.25 to 0.1%. But Paul Keating is right that the RBA isn't doing much to help the government fund its spending. It's buying the least amount of government debt of any central bank in the world. Partly because of the falling dollar, the share market turned very sprightly today, up 2.3%, recovering a week of falls in one day. Car sales, REA, Flight Centre, Transurban and CSL produced some of the best gains. The US market rose 1% last night, but Asian markets didn't do much today. Oil and copper went up on commodity markets, but gold and iron ore went down. And today's morsel of economic data was retail sales, down 4.2% in August, which is today's least surprising news, given what's happening in Victoria. And that's finance.
Qantas has ended its 30-year partnership with the Wallabies as the airline continues to rein in spending during the pandemic. The announcement coincides with the reappointment of Michael Hooper as captain of the national side and is a huge blow to Rugby Australia, which still hasn't secured a TV rights deal for next year.
Qantas have been, we've been hugely affected by COVID and had to lay off a lot of staff. So, it's understandable that, you can't be laying off staff and still investing money in a sponsorship perspective.
Qantas will continue to provide flights to Football Federation Australia and Cricket Australia, but has paused all cash payments to sports organisations. Climate scientists are predicting an above-average number of tropical cyclones will form off Australia's east coast this cyclone season. As for the top end, their outlook suggests fewer cyclones than normal, but they say their research shouldn't replace any advice from the Bureau of Meteorology.
It's been 2.5 years since Cyclone Marcus tore through the top end, leaving a wake of damage across Darwin. And with a La Nina weather pattern expected to bring more rain and wind to northern Australia this wet season, some are worried it might bring powerful cyclones too.
During La Nina, the conditions most favourable for tropical cyclone activity move closer to Australia. And during La Ninas, we typically see elevated tropical cyclone risk for Australia. We typically see double the number of landfalling tropical cyclones during a La Nina versus an El Nino.
A new tropical cyclone outlook is predicting an above-average number of cyclones will hit parts of Australia this year. But across the top end, the forecast is for 3 cyclones this season, which is less than usual.
For the northern region, our outlook suggests that we may see around 3 tropical cyclones for this coming season, but the probable range can vary from as little as 2 to as many as 5 tropical cyclones. Now, that's a little bit lower than the long-term average for the northern region of 4 tropical cyclones.
The forecast doesn't include when they'll form, how intense they'll be, or if they'll make landfall.
At this stage, our outlook does not consider intensity, but future work will look to try to incorporate an intensity-based outlook into our new research.
The next outlook will be published in late October as the countdown to cyclone season begins. Nicholas Hines, ABC News.
Staying with the weather, and Keith Vickers sent in tonight's viewer pick. Isolated rain and storms continued over central and southern parts of the territory today. It was a very humid start to the day in Darwin, with the relative humidity soaring to 94% at 7 a.m. It was really hot again in Katherine, where it hit 39 degrees. In Alice Springs, it got to 27 and 32 the top in Nhulunbuy. Tennant Creek topped the 24-hour rain list with 10 millimetres and Wave Hill got 2. Earlier today, the action was in the far east, with Borroloola collecting 7 millimetres. It was cooler in most capitals, reaching 15 degrees in Canberra, Melbourne and Hobart. On the satellite, a trough is generating patchy cloud and rain over central and southern parts of the Northern Territory. That trough is moving northwards, and that's likely to bring more rain to the western top end, including Darwin, from tomorrow. A cold front will see the mercury plummet tonight in Canberra, with a low of just 4 degrees expected. Sunny tomorrow in Brisbane and Sydney. To Southeast Asia, and cloud dominates the region, a top of 31 degrees in Jakarta and 30 in Dili. Back home, getting down to 10 degrees tonight in Alice Springs, a sunny 28 tomorrow, 33 in Tennant Creek and 31 for Yuendamu. Chance of rain again in the Katherine district tomorrow, and it'll be warm and dry in the far northeast. There's a 50% chance of rain in the far north tomorrow as that trough moves up. High tide tomorrow morning will be around 9:45, and there'll be a low tide of just 1 metre for sunset. Thursday's sun will rise at 6:34 and will go down at 6:43. And looking ahead for Darwin, showers and storms could make a comeback from tomorrow before easing again on Sunday. In Alice Springs, becoming a little warmer over the next few days, with cloudy weather through to next week. And to stay up to date with the latest news from the Northern Territory, head to our website, news.abc.net.au. Stay with us now. Lee Sales is up next with 7:30.
Hello and welcome.